Hello, my name is Eric, and today, in this episode of the podcast, I invited a guest, Edward Miskie, and we're going to talk about gay men who have or had cancer and their sex life. Welcome to the craziness that lives inside my head. The way we're going to start off is I would like for you to introduce yourself to my audience. And then basically I was thinking, see, I did a podcast when I was diagnosed with prostate cancer.
Mhm.
That was about 2 years ago. So um, I'll be honest with you, I was bitching to my audience how, because they did, what do you call it? Hormone treatment. So you
Mhm.
know what that meant.
Yeah.
And I have friends say, well, at least you're alive. And I'd be like, well, I mean, life without sex is, I don't know.
Well, I mean, there are worse things to do, and that's certainly something that I talk about frequently. One of the main topics that I tend to cover is sex, drugs, and cancer. Because as you well know, that those are three things that kind of weirdly go hand in hand without one necessarily thinking that it is something that is cohesive together.
Uh,
Prostate cancer, obviously, that's more specific to sex. But like any kind of cancer that's going to take your body down because of medication, because of the longevity of it, because of whatever reason, of course that's going to be part of the conversation. And I have found that it is most often forgotten that people just don't think about that the when you're thinking or talking about cancer or cancer patients.
yeah.
The more human aspects of being alive, whether that be any kind of pleasure whatsoever or specifically sex is just completely left off the table, and you're like, well, I'm not fucking dead. Like
Yeah, I know.
um so I'll use that as my intro to say um, that I'm Edward Miskie. I'm the author of Cancer, Musical Theater, and Other Chronic Illnesses. I'm a New York City based recovering actor and writer, producer, singer, songwriter, all of the things. I wear many hats. And this is now my 11th, just past 11 years of being cancer free since I was first diagnosed with a rare non-Hodgkin's lymphoma that almost fucking killed me. I'm a sole survivor of the kind in the sense that no one else who has had this particular type has lived this long or lived this long without a reoccurrence. And so I'm happy to lead that charge. It is kind of a scary place to be because should something happen, well, there's no research there. It's just me. And so with that, I'll kind of turn it back over to you and let's talk.
Yeah, because I read one of your, I think after you did a podcast about you got cancer and you lost your boyfriend.
Yeah, that was later on. Had I known I kind of wish I would have known a little bit sooner that he was seeing someone else.
Oh,
But I think it shook out the way that it needed to shake out. He evidently, as soon as I had found out that I was going to be in the hospital long term and be in treatment and go through all this stuff, he took it upon himself to start dating someone else near next to immediately. And I was just kind of like this person that he would call or text or talk to or visit. Um, to keep up appearances or to give me what he thought I needed or whatever the case may be, but it just all ended up backfiring and it was a really ugly kind of parting of ways. I will say one of the things that I can look back on now in hindsight is that even though those circumstances for what they were terrible and I vilified him for a really long time and I still do to a degree because of how it was handled. I kind of don't blame him in that sense. Not that I'm saying he did the right thing, but me 11 years out, if I would be dating someone now that that happened to, there's a laundry list of reasons why I would not stick around. And I would like to think that I would, and I'd be able to be the stronger person, and like my kind of like parental need to take care of people would take over more than bail. Um, but it's a very hard ask. It's a very, very difficult ask, especially with someone that you haven't been with for that long. He and I had barely been together a year at that point, and you're asking this huge monstrosity of a task of this person that really, in the long run, doesn't owe you anything, and that's a hard pill to swallow.
Well, it brought me back to well, I'm pretty old. So I lived through the 70s and the 80s, and I lost a lot of friends in the 80s. And there was one guy, I remember this since when I got my cancer. It brought back this memory. His name was Gil, and I liked him a lot. And we were having lunch, whatever, and he was free and I was free. But then we got in this conversation about AIDS, HIV. And he started giving me a laundry list. And one of the laundry lists is he wouldn't even date somebody if it was HIV. He wouldn't even date somebody that were fat like me. I mean, he had this long laundry list of things he wouldn't do. And I noticed that, so, because when I got diagnosed with prostate cancer, the first thing came to my mind, I was seeing somebody at the time who was a little older than me. And all of this emotion brought up. I said, well, when he finds out, he's going to do, what Gil was talking about. Because back then, not many, I don't think, because of HIV, I don't think too many gay men were too kind. It's like they wanted to distance themselves. Anybody got cancer,
Of
which
course.
HIV had that other cancer, they want to distance themselves. They don't want to. So
Well, I think that's also something that anyone who, well, I don't want to speak for everyone, but for me personally, when I was diagnosed, the first thing I thought was, oh my God, I'm going to be the sick person. And I don't want to be the sick person. And I didn't want to be the sick person in my own life. And I didn't want to be the sick person in other people's eyes.
yeah,
And I think that there is a generational trauma that carries down from exactly that, where there's so much stigma around gay men being sick or looking sick or appearing sick that there's a fear of it, which is why you see these guys now like pumping themselves full of steroids and Restylane and fillers and all that other shit. And, and that's not HIV or AIDS specific. I think that's just a general looking a particular way that people like side eye you and they're like, something's wrong with you. Um, but it was definitely something that came across my consciousness when that happened, because I didn't want to be the sick guy. I didn't want to be the sick gay guy that people were going to speculate about. And people did. I actually had people close to me that tried to spread a rumor that I was lying about having cancer and I actually had AIDS and I was dying,
yeah,
which in 2011 is, first of all, ignorant as fuck.
yeah,
Like, if that was like 93 or something like that, sure, fine. I could understand how that would be like a sentence that might come out of your mouth. But like at that point, PrEP had already started to be introduced and tested, and it just wasn't like a real conversation to be had. Um, but it was that fear of being viewed in that way that really freaked me out, and it's one of the reasons I didn't tell anybody. I told my closest friends, I told my family, and that was it.
yeah, yeah. When that's one of the things that um well, my guy, we just broke up recently. And I met him around the time that I was diagnosed with cancer. So he used to joke a lot about there's some line in what's the name of that movie? The Birdcage. They had some line that he would joke about well, Dorothy or something. You no longer going to do the dance of the red bird tonight. He kept saying that. So, I mean, I like the fact that I had someone, which I thought, to fall back on emotionally. And on top of that, I had my knee replaced. So it was what first year, my knee got replaced first year, but I did get diagnosed that first year. I didn't get the radiation and all that the second year. So I had this person to, to lean on. And I was living in a fantasy world because what happened was, yes, he was fooling around.
Well, but here's the thing though. I would hesitate to say that it was a bad thing for you to be living in a fantasy world because I was too. I was kind of trying to blow past the present of what was I was experiencing, and in my mind I was creating this life for the two of us together after the fact.
Yeah,
And it's what I needed. It's what I psychologically needed during those times where I was like laid up in a hospital room for 10 days at a time or more, being pumped full of drugs. It is what I needed to survive.
right,
And your brain is very smart. Your brain will always do what it needs to survive. And there are instances where your brain will actually kill off parts of your body if it means that if the brain will survive. Like that's the brain's job, is to live. And like if living in a fantasy world or creating some kind of reality for yourself during a, a place of trauma that is happening to you, then that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. I think we all kind of do that in a way. Not related to cancer or being sick at all necessarily, but I think we all kind of give ourselves the narrative that we need to keep going.
yeah. But the thing was, I used to beat myself up and said, well, now I'm damaged goods.
But again, I think that also comes from the idea of, well, first of all, that comes from like virginal patriarchy crap telling women that they're damaged goods and that they'll never find a partner, they'll never reproduce or whatever, and you're damaged goods. But then that also trickles its way down into the gay community, which is also steeped in the patriarchy and white supremacy as well, where if you're not a particular way, you're viewed as other, which is could be translated into damaged goods. And I remember very specifically during the early aughts, and the early years of me being in New York City, sometimes men who knew other people who had been diagnosed as HIV positive would refer to them as damaged goods. And like that was horrifying to be around. It was like, and like, what do? You just like laugh it off because you're with people and you're like, and I was a teenager, so it was kind of hard to be like, hey, don't be a dick. You know? Um, and like not to get too far on a tangent about this, but we also used to say house in Virginia. Like, do they have a house in Virginia? And like that was kind of our thing that we would ask around, or if we were like, instead of being like, are you tested? Are you clean? Have you been tested? Because that is just like triggering horrible verbiage as well. We would always ask, do you have a house in Virginia? And like that was kind of it was it made it, I think, a little bit and fun in such a weird time. It was such a transitional time with that, but we don't have to go down that road if you don't want to.
Well, I just find that it just interesting, maybe because I'm not steep into the gay community. I retired recently and I used to do a lot of stuff. I'm from New York. So I've done a lot of stuff in New York with the clubs, the clubs in the 70s. And then when AIDS came out, they had these, well, clubs for like the Big Man Club, the Bear Clubs. I joined all them.
Mm.
And then came the 2000s. Goodness. So I noticed things have changed, in the gay community. And you don't hear too much about cancer and HIV. I mean, like I said, I'm not really involved in it. Um, but I got a little depressed today because I had a friend who always look at my page and mention it, and I noticed he haven't, and then I found out that he passed.
Mm.
But anyway, I just thought it would be a very good topic to touch on.
Well, it's important, and I think any kind of discussion about men's health, specific to gay men's health, is important to talk about because there isn't a whole lot of education and resources out there for when you're typically being taught about health, which for me was like anywhere between the fourth and eighth grade when we would have like human sexuality classes and like the girls would go in one room and the boys would go in another room. And, you know, you'd be like, let's learn about masturbation. And they'd be like, you're going to bleed for the rest of your life. And just like this big dichotomy of education, but there was no gay sex education ever. You know, mine was like watching George Michael on VH1. Like that was my sex education. Or like staying up late and sneaking downstairs and watching MTV's Undressed. Like that was my sex education because
Yeah,
there wasn't any that was relevant to me. And so I think a lot of us who are over a particular age, I don't know what they're doing now with teaching the youths about like sex ed and education and whatnot. Um, but I very distinctly remember in the eighth grade, they basically were like, this is how you reproduce, and now we're gonna watch Philadelphia starring Tom Hanks. And it was like, uh and so that adds to that further uncomfortableness about knowing what to do, you know, like your only reference is like heteronormative sexuality, and then Tom Hanks and Antonio Banderas in Philadelphia, which is horrifying to watch as a teenager. And I just feel like a lot of people under a certain age, or I guess over a certain age is what I'm trying to say, just didn't have the sex ed that we should have had. And so any conversation about gay men's health, whether it is sex specific or otherwise, cancer, prostate cancer, whatever have you, it's important to talk about because there are no resources for us.
yeah, yeah.
And if there are, you have to go look for them. And if you don't know to go look for them, then you know what you're back where you started, you know.
I told this woman friend of mine that my doctor have me on Cialis.
Hmm.
Um, I said that, of course I wanted it for, it doesn't work yet, but when I Google it, when I Google it, he has me on Cialis, not so much for the sex. He did tell me, well, if you get that mood, take a pill, but I'm supposed to take it every other day. It helps you urinate, Cialis.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know that.
That's what he told me because I he asked me was I still taking it. And I said, yeah. He said, well, how your urination? Because that's supposed to help you.
I
So,
did not know that.
well,
Interesting.
it has something, how men's body is down there is connected. So it's connected or connected. So it's, you know,
That's so fascinating. That's also making me wonder. My grandfather had prostate cancer later in life, and I'm wondering if they had him on that.
well, it depends now. Did they, because my dad had it and they caught his in time, but my dad opted to have it removed, his
Hmm.
prostate. See, I still have my prostate.
Right.
My problem right now, there was this, well, I saw my urologist. She's what you call a PA something. She's not my doctor, she's his assistant.
Right.
So I was talking to her about it, and she would say something about your testosterone. I
Hmm.
said, yeah, but you killed my testosterone. So what did you I said
Well,
it's the odds is not
there's
helping.
topical, there's injectable. I'm sure there's ingestible at this point, like testosterone pills. Where are those?
Well, my urologist, my doctor, when I saw him 2 years ago, and we had this discussion, he was going through the whole list. He was saying Viagra, Cialis. He said I could give you an implant. I could give you something you bump it up.
An
I said,
implant?
yeah, he was
I
just
didn't know
going.
that that was the solution.
I was just, I don't know, I was just appalled. I mean, it's not natural to do that.
I mean, but listen, neither is having radiation or chemotherapy. There's nothing natural about that. Like I've kind of crossed the Rubicon of like, if you want to buy the body you want, go for it. If you want your body to do something that it doesn't do naturally, knock yourself out. As long as you are safe about it. Steroids is a different conversation in my mind. That's just to me is so scary and so unregulated and so like anything that fucks with your heart, I'm kind of off the table with.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
just maybe don't do that. But otherwise, I mean more so like if you want to do Botox, if you want to like take, Cialis or whatever, if you like, just go for it. Who cares? We've reached the point in science where it's possible, so why not? No
Well,
judgment, you know?
yeah, well. Anyway, I still have to see the doctor. They're checking on my testosterone. They
Yeah.
claim if it goes up, then they're gonna have to. But anyway, they won't say I'm in remission though.
Well, I mean, there's a couple markers that you have to hit before that happens, I believe. Mine was like I had to wait 100 days after my stem cell transplant for them to be able to say that I had no living cancer left.
Yeah.
And then I was very closely monitored. And then it became a couple times a year, then it became fewer times a year, and then after 5 years, I did not see my oncologist ever again. And I actually didn't know that that was happening. So I was in my appointment with my oncologist at my 5 year mark, and she's like doing the routine thing, and she's like, "Hey, it's your 5 year anniversary of whatever," and I was like, "Oh my God, you're right." And she gave me this little pin, and it was very, very cute and touching. And I thanked her for it, and she was like, "Well, you won't see me again."
Mm.
And my bitch ass sat in that room and cried because I had grown to like her. She'd become this part of this chapter of my life that was so crazy
Mm.
and so like disorienting. And then all of a sudden she hands me this pin and she's like, "I'm not going to see you anymore." It felt like a breakup. And I was devastated. I like literally was like sitting in my appointment room in her office just crying that I wasn't going to see her ever again. And so I don't know what the specific benchmarkers are for prostate cancer, but like I know that it's a couple years of having been totally okay and going with ongoing treatment and whatnot, and then they can finally say like, you're cancer free, you're in remission, blah 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 blah.
Well, I guess it's gonna be a while because I have two doctors. I have a urologist and a radiologist. I
Yeah.
see both. So
Well, I mean, listen, you should ask them. I think one thing that I learned very early in this process was that you have to advocate for yourself. If you don't understand what's happening, it is your right to ask them. If you don't feel comfortable with what they're doing, it is your right to tell them that and find out why they're doing it. It's one of the reasons why I switched hospitals in the middle of my treatment because I did not like what they were asking me to do. Um, just something about it didn't make sense. It didn't feel right. There was like a voice in me that was like, "You shouldn't have to do this. This doesn't make sense." And I conveyed that to them, and they kind of threw the book at me. And I was like, "Great, give me my file." And I left the hospital and I went and got a second opinion. And that is what saved my life.
yeah,
If I would have stayed at that other hospital, I don't know if I would have made it.
yeah, yeah. Well, I wasn't I had good fortune. My dad, before he passed away, I was taking care of him, and so I was taking him to his doctor. So when I took him to the urologist said, "Did you know your dad had prostate cancer?" I said, "No, I didn't." He said, "Oh yeah, we caught it in time, but we got to, they got to keep track of me." So anyway,
Well, and again, that's self advocacy, that's patient advocacy, and that's also kind of, it's part of adulting, which is already so fucking hard. Like to be an adult and just get through the day. Like there's so many things that you have to do. And then you also have to like go to doctors all the time to make sure that you're all right. To make sure that you just, don't have like some tiny little pain that you ignore for a couple years and then all of a sudden you're like stage 4 cancer and you're dead in a month,
yeah, yeah,
and that sounds so brash, but like so's dying in a month after a diagnosis. So like it really is it's first and foremost taking care of yourself in every way that you're capable of doing so, and then also standing up for yourself and being vocal at your appointments. Like I always was asking, and thankfully I had my mom near me who had mixed chemotherapy. She has worked in hospital settings from the time I was an infant, and she was such a badass and would take notes and write everything down and the dosages, and she'd double check them and cross reference them with any kind of drug interactions and this, that, and the next thing. She was amazing. And had she not been there, there were a couple things that happened that would have maybe either killed me or put me out. Like they were going to give me the wrong chemotherapy on the wrong day. They were going to give me the wrong dosage of it. They put me on drugs that they shouldn't have, so they had to take me off. And it was all because my mom was there to track it. And I myself would not have been able to do that. So you can ask for a hospital advocate, you can ask for a patient advocate. If you're not able to do it yourself, not all of us are going to have functional medical knowledge. I'm so lucky that I had my mom with a breadth of functional, relevant medical knowledge to be able to sit in that room and be like, that's not supposed to be that dose. And we don't all have that, and she's a baddie for it. But if it's just you, or it's you and someone who knows just as little about what's happening, ask, 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 ask. Go home, look it up on reputable medical websites. Like, try not to fall down conspiracy theory rabbit holes, because that's super easy to do online. But like, there are real, like, medical websites that you can go to that are reputable, that you can look up what is the typical protocol for what you're going through. I'm sure that you could go on to like the Mayo Clinic's website and look up some kind of protocol for
Well,
prostate cancer treatment and aftercare.
I went there to look at the what you call after side effects.
Yeah.
I had the side effects, especially with that radiation, was like, you know,
Oh my God, that radiation is a bitch. I didn't have it where you had it. I had it under my arm, but I know what that skin looked like, and that was no fun.
well, put it this way, you know what the prostate is, so I had
I sure
it
do.
in that, and I had it in
I
that
am I
area,
am acutely aware of where it is.
and I just recently, because I told my radiologist doctor, so now I have a little side effects, which really pissed me off. But what can you do? I'm getting back to what I tell you. My friends said, "Well, you happy to be alive?" I said, "Yeah, but there's more to life than just being alive, in my opinion."
Right. Well, and also that's kind of up to you. Like, you are alive, and so what do you do with that? Um, that was one of the things that got me through entirely, because I refused, like I said before, to be a sick person. I refused. I didn't want to be one. And so I raged against that as hard as I could, to my not benefit. Like, I talk a lot about how I drank my way through cancer and I fucked my way through cancer, and I just did absolutely everything I possibly could to sabotage myself. But in my mind, it wasn't sabotaging. It was me trying to be normal. It was me trying to be like, this isn't real and it's not happening. Even though I knew it was, I was obviously in the hospital and conscious of what was going on, but I would go and do things to feel like a human. And yes, they were self-destructive, and that is not by any means what I'm saying you should go do. But, you know, all of those decisions were in my hands, and I could have instead, gone to a yoga class, walked through the park instead of getting shit faced at 4 in the afternoon. Like, it's up to you. And when you're in that recovery mode, when you're especially in the aftercare mode where you have to be so delicate with yourself, you really do have to make a daily decision, sometimes multiple times a day decision, with and for yourself, that you're going to do life as big as you can that day. And if that's just walking down the street to get, a coffee and coming back, and that's all you can do, that's better than sitting in a fucking lazy boy, rotting your brain watching television. Like, I like the first month of me being out of the hospital, it was so hard to just walk down the street, but we had to do it, because otherwise the other option is that I just stayed atrophied in bed and miserable for the rest of my life, and nobody wants that. So it was very much like, again, thankfully I had my parents there to help me and motivate me to get the fuck up. But I would spend all day in bed if I could.
Mm.
But, my parents came over, my dad would cook for me, my mom would be like, get up, and we'd go outside and we'd walk over to the river, and we would sit and watch people run by, which pissed me off because I wasn't strong enough to run. Although there's plenty of eye candy in the running department. Um, but it was a daily decision that I had to make, and I didn't always want to make it, and it wasn't comfortable to make a lot of the times, and it sucked, because it also was a reminder of what I couldn't do, going and seeing all those people running down the river. Well, I used to be an athlete when I was a teenager, and I was very a gym goer, 2-3 hours a day. And then to be able to see people who were still doing that, and here I am, skin and bones, and like skin hanging off of me, sitting on a park bench, feeling like shit. I didn't want to go do it, but I had to, because the other option wasn't really all that appealing.
When I was told, I was complaining to my urologist how that hormone make you gain weight. I gained like 70 pounds.
Mhm.
And she said, "Are you working out?" And I said, "No," because I used to go to the gym too. I said, "No." She said, "Well, the problem is you got to build up your testosterone. You got to go to the gym." So, you know me, I'm like a little 3-year-old banging my, "Hey, when I got to the gym, I'm tired of going to the gym. I don't want to go. I don't want to go." So that's my, not my New Year's resolution, is getting back to the gym. Last time I was at the gym was 2020. When they shut the gym down because of COVID, I haven't been back.
No,
So,
I understand. I have not been back as much as I would like to myself, but it really is. And you know what? Like, I get that. And part of kind of advocating for yourself is figuring out a way that you can do that, even if it isn't going to the gym. You have a cat, chase your cat around the house.
oh, you see him, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or
Well,
like,
he won't let
do
me do
some
anything on the computer without.
but but like pick your cat up and like do a squat or two. If that's all you can do, you don't have to do 100 squats, like do two of them. Great, you're done. And if you do that every day, then you'll build up to doing 20, 30, 40, 50. There's so much you can do at home without a gym, which is, I think, something that we all learned during the pandemic, whether we wanted to or not, is that like if you have a chair and a body,
Yeah.
there's plenty that you can do without having to go to the gym. Because I have social anxiety at the gym. I hate going, especially now that I'm not in shape anymore. I get really panicked about it. I'm like, oh God, people are looking at me. And if, God forbid, I run into anyone I know,
Oh,
then
yeah.
like the immediate thought is like, oh, you got fucking fat, you fucking pig.
Yeah.
And like obviously that's not what they're thinking, likely, but that's what I tell myself they're thinking. And so it spins me around to not want to go to the gym. And so working out at home, or don't even think about it as working out. When I first was out of the hospital, I couldn't do shit. And eventually, once I started to get my strength back, I would work out a little bit at home with like resistance bands, or I would have someone come over and guide me through yoga. And it was really simple. And eventually it built back, you know. And then, alcohol, cheese, and the pandemic happened and I undid all of it. But um and I'm the only person stopping me from getting back to it. And again, it's a decision. You
Yeah.
could throw a tantrum like 3-year-old, and if that's what you need to do, great. When you're done doing that, make a decision that's the best for yourself.
Okay, Edward, thank you for being on my show. So
Thank you for having me.
and you just heard the craziness that lives inside my head.